Hoping everyone's having a pleasant day. We're here at the XPO Freight Terminal in beautiful Trexlertown, Pennsylvania. And the question has come up a couple times as to how to figure out what axle ratio, otherwise known as the final drive, that you have in your F-150. And the same question applies to Super Duties and other vehicles too, but we'll answer it for at least the F-150 right now because that's the case in point at the moment. And it's easy on some F-150s because for instance, the power boost, every single power boost that is a four-wheel drive, like the one we used to own, has a 373. And I think they're all electronic locking. Correct me if I'm wrong. Every single two-wheel drive power boost has a 355. And I'm not sure if those are electronic locking as well. You can always tell if you've got an electronic locking differential because you see that little where it says drive mode push, which is a very actually confusing knob there, or dial. If you push it, it locks the rear differential, as you can kind of tell because that picture of a lock that you have there. And if you don't see that lock there, then you may not have an electronic locking rear differential. But the question still stands in some other F-150s like this one here, the diesel, which can come with a number of different final drive ratios from the factory. Which one is it? And to some people, that's an important question. And so there's an easy answer, okay? The easy answer is to check the sticker in the door jamb. Okay, and you see where it says axle L3. That is the axle code. And we've got a handy dandy chart here pulled up. And if you just go to where it says F-150 axle code guide, F-150 trucks axle code guide, we said the code was L3. And as you can tell there very clearly, L3 means you've got a 331 final drive. A 355, on the other hand, is an L9 or an H9 or a 19. 373 is, as you see there, an L6, B6, or a 26. And a 410 is an L4. I've never heard of anyone having a 410 in their F-150, which kind of seems like overkill, unless all you're doing is towing heavy trailers. And then a 315, which is also overkill in the other direction, is a 15 or an L5. And there's another chart here. No, I don't want the discount. There's another chart here that lays it out a little bit differently. Again, the truck that we have in question, which has an L3 axle code, that's an electronic locking 331. And again, the power boost that we used to own was a 373 electronic locking, so that would have been an L6. And then some of them are non-limited slip, meaning a completely open differential, and then some of them are limited slip, which is like halfway between a non-limited and a locking. And so you can see all those codes there, and again, it makes it very easy, at least for newer F-150s, maybe in the last 5 or 6 or 8 years, to tell what final drive your truck has. Okay. Again, the options being 315, 331, 355, 373, or 410. Okay. And then the question some people ask is, why should you care? And the reason why you should care is that it has a big impact on two things. The first is your towing capability, your max towing capability, and the comfort or ease with which you do towing. As we are now, we've got our little 12-foot RC enclosed cargo trailer hitched up because we just got back from, or we're just heading back from Washington, D.C., where we did a delivery and installation at a certain location in Washington, D.C. yesterday. And we do a lot of towing with this truck, with the diesel F-150. And we tow our 12-foot cargo trailer, again, that you see back there. And we tow our 28-foot Featherlight enclosed car hauler, which we don't actually use for car hauling. and we've towed the 12-foot enclosed U-Haul, which is a neat little trailer. And we've towed with a tow dolly before, various cars and so on and so forth. And so this is a good truck for towing, not a great truck for towing, but it's good because of the fuel economy that it gets. If you could see there, our current trip, which is just over 115 miles, shows you an MPG, miles to the gallon, of 20.4. There is no other F-150 on the planet that can get 20.4 miles to the gallon with a trailer hitched up to it, other than the diesel F-150. Our power boost, when we had this very same trailer hitched up to it, it was getting low to mid single-digit MPGs. Like, we're talking 5 to maybe 7 or 8 MPGs. And maybe 10 or 12 if we kept the speed way, way down. But that's very hard to do in a power boost. Both because of the immense amount of power and torque that it produces, and also because of that very, very short final drive that it has. And in our case, again, it was a 373, which was really overkill for that truck, because that truck had so much power, so much torque at such a low RPM. You didn't need a 373. It didn't need that much leverage over the rear wheels. It had all the leverage it needed, and so really it would have been a lot better with the 355, which you get in the two-wheel drive power boost. And it would have been just fine with this final drive, which is a 331 in this diesel F-150. But that thing was a monster. It was an absolute monster. And you never had to worry about certain things that you do in this truck. But at the same time, almost as a consequence of that fact, you got really, really bad, like awful, horrific MPGs when you were towing. The same MPGs that we're getting with this truck with a trailer hitched up. Like 20 average ish, call it 18 to 20 MPGs at, highway speeds between 60 and 65 and maybe 70. In this diesel F-150 with a trailer, that was your MPGs in the power boost without a trailer. And again, you got the fact that this is a diesel engine, which is inherently more efficient, especially under heavy loads, but even without heavy loads. You got the fact that it's towing an object that has really bad aerodynamics, this trailer, which is not a gooseneck. And a gooseneck actually has much, much better aerodynamics. And then you get the final drive coming into play. And so all those things work in your favor in the F-150 diesel, and they work against you in the power boost. So that's the reason why this thing is getting like essentially triple the MPGs that the power boost gets when you're towing. Hope that makes sense. But here's the problem that same 331 final drive, which really helps your MPGs, the problem that creates, and the problem it creates, especially in conjunction with this transmission, is that your RPMs are so far down most of the time that you're almost lugging the engine. The diesel, it does produce a decent amount of boost. It can produce up to, I think, mid-20s of PSI of a boost with the turbo, with the single turbo, as opposed to the EcoBoost or Power Boost, which has a twin turbo. Produces a lot of boost. And when you're under boost, you don't want to have the RPMs way, way down. And the reason why, especially in an engine like this, a little 3.0 diesel. And the problem is that when your RPMs are way down, you need to produce an enormous amount of torque from the engine to generate the power that you need in order to move the vehicle at any given speed. So maybe going uphill at 65 miles an hour in top gear. This thing will be at 1,500 RPMs or below. And the problem with the engine being at that low of an RPM, again, is that it takes a certain amount of horsepower to push the truck and trailer uphill at a certain speed. And that horsepower, that required horsepower, increases dramatically with speed because of your drag, which increases, like, not just like in a straight line with your speed, but it goes up like that, like exponentially or parabolically or whatever. And when you have that much drag and when you have that much power requirement, but your RPMs are way, way down, keep it in mind that power is just torque times RPMs. When your RPMs go way, way down, then your torque production has to go way, way up. And the problem with that is that it creates massive cylinder pressure, because it requires massive combustion pressure to generate that torque. And that puts your piston rings, that puts your head gasket, head gaskets, that puts everything in your engine under a massive amount of stress to produce that much torque at that low of an RPM. Again, look at that boost gauge there. Again, it goes. This engine makes a lot of boost under load, 20 plus PSI at the moment. And we're, look at the RPMs, we're in like the 1500 RPM range. And so compare 1500 with 2000 RPMs. At 2000 RPMs, that is 1/3 more in terms of RPMs. And so if it's like 4/3 of the RPMs in one gear that it would be in a different gear, then you only need 3/4 of the torque production to make the same amount of power to push that truck and trailer up the hill. Okay, I'm not trying to get too technical here. But again, your RPMs and your torque multiply together to generate your horsepower. And so if there's a massive amount of horsepower requirement, and your boost is going to be responsive to your horsepower requirement, it doesn't really have anything to do with your RPMs. Look at your boost gauge as essentially the power gauge, or the required power gauge, and then if your transmission was a little bit smarter than this one is, this 10-speed, it would be essentially going easy on the engine and trying to keep the RPMs in a little more of a sweet spot, so that you didn't massively load the engine up with torque production, which loads up the engine with cylinder pressure and combustion pressure and creates massive stress on your rings and on your head gaskets. And over hundreds of thousands of miles, that's probably not going to end that well for you. And it might seem like we're getting way off track in terms of your final drive, but your final drive, or your axle ratio, kind of plays into all of this, because the lower the number is of your axle ratio, like the 331 being a lot lower of a number than a 373, the lower the number, the taller your ratio. That's how it's described. And the less leverage your engine and transmission are going to have over your wheels. Does that make sense? Again, think of your final drive number as the amount of leverage that your engine and transmission have over your wheels. And so the lower that number, the less leverage, because there's less of a multiplication happening with the torque that's coming out of the output shaft of your transmission, the harder your engine and your transmission are both going to have to work to generate the horsepower that's required and transmit it to your wheels in order to move your truck and trailer at a certain speed. And I hope that all makes sense, and I hope that's not too confusing. Now you can mitigate that fact. You can mitigate a really, really tall final drive like this truck has, specifically the 331, by having a transmission that's a little more intelligent, and by programming it to not always try to force the truck to be in top gear when you're at low RPMs, going up steep hills with a heavy trailer in tow haul mode, as we are now. But this transmission doesn't really do that. It's kind of on a kamikaze mission to get into top gear and stay in top gear to the greatest extent possible. And that being the case, it's going to put a lot more load on the engine, and it's going to decrease the responsiveness of the engine, and it's going to always make it feel like you got to keep it floored, and give it a lot more throttle than you would think you should, with just a little 12-foot trailer hitched up, going up moderate inclines at highway speeds. Again, 65 miles an hour, especially in Pennsylvania here, the roads kind of go up and down and up and down. When you're on even a slight uphill rise, this truck starts to struggle in top gear. at like 65 miles an hour. And so you're constantly having to work these buttons, the plus and minus buttons, to lock out the upper gears of the transmission and take it from a 10-speed to a 9-speed to even an 8-speed, and in some cases all the way down to a 7-speed. 7th gear being your direct drive, your 1-to-1, and 8th, 9th, and 10th being your 3 overdrives. So that's the impact that your axle ratio or your final drive has on the drivability of your vehicle and your fuel economy. And that's why, again, a lot of people, especially when you're test driving a truck or when you're thinking about buying one, buying a used one, which might not have the sticker anymore, why you're going to want to know that, and why, again, if you're shopping for a diesel F-150, these are great trucks in a lot of ways, great MPGs, a very durable engine. It is probably going to last longer than an EcoBoost, just because of the fact that a diesel's built heavier. Although if you know the history of the 3.0, it has had a lot of growing pains over the years, and Ford's engineers, truck engineers, had to modify it extensively as they were getting it ready to install in the F-150, which they first did in 2018. And so, you know, could this engine last 250,000 miles easily? Yes, it could. Could it last 500,000 miles? I don't know. Hard to say. You're going to have to change the timing belt, and there's like a front timing belt, and there's something in the rear that you're going to have to change also. I don't know if it's the oil pump drive belt like you got in that 3.0 Duramax, which is in the back of the engine, which you got to change after I think 100 or 150,000 miles. But you're pulling the cab on this truck once the miles get up, because the maintenance on this engine, the 3.0, is it takes a lot of routine maintenance. And again, if you're thinking about buying a used one, there's no reason not to. But if you're thinking about buying a diesel F-150 that's used and you plan to do a lot of towing with it, I know they're kind of hard to come by because not a lot were really made over the years, especially not this 21 version with the refreshed interior, the refreshed exterior. Had a lot of changes, a whole lot of changes, which were great in practically every way over the 18 through 20 and the 15 through 17. Really, the 21 through 23, as far as I'm concerned, are the best F-150s that were ever made. The 24, the mini refresh in 24, not an improvement in almost any way. But you're gonna want to know what's the final drive in my F-150 that I'm thinking of buying. And if you're thinking of buying a diesel, which is a great truck in a lot of ways, largely related to that number in the middle there that you see, 20 MPGs with a trailer. If you have a choice in the matter, you might want to think twice before getting a diesel F-150 with a 331. I would absolutely recommend a 355 or maybe even a 373. That would give this truck a lot more responsiveness, and it would be a lot more pleasant of a truck to drive with the trailer hitched up to it, which is the major use case of the diesel F-150. And again, with the 331, it struggles. It feels weak. It feels very weak, even with a little 12-foot trailer, and especially with our 28-foot gooseneck trailer, which we have loaded up as heavy as 6,500 pounds in the past. And with 6,500 pounds, this truck feels, I'm just gonna say gutless. At least with the 331. Probably a lot less so with the 355, and probably much less so with the 373. So anyway, now you know. Probably more than you ever wanted to know about final drives in an F-150. Thanks everyone, and hope you have a great day.